called Max. I said the same thing. It's Jeffrey Goodman. I'm a filmmaker in Los Angeles. I'm interested in turning your story into a film. You know, it'd probably be hard for me to get Steven Spielberg on the phone, but
Sure.
people at Max's level, I think, are, you know, accessible if you
You have
do
to
the
ask, right? And,
right.
And you know, your story is a little bit of a story of perseverance and will, I think, and that comes through. And I think there's something to be said for someone who you know, you make the attempt and you try and you push forward, because what else can you do, right? And it's if you're not doing it, someone else is doing it. So.
Yeah, and I mean, even that article I was telling you about, there's an article in the recent issue of Movie Maker magazine. The title of the article is called "The Fish Never Jumped in the Boat," because when I was starting to put my business plan together and try and raise the money for Lullaby, this guy told me, he said, you know, people talk in such cryptic ways sometimes, but he told me, he said, you know, I've been fishing all of my life and never once have I seen the fish jump in the boat. And I mean, basically, you know, he was just saying, like, no one's just going to come knocking on your door and say, here's $50,000. Like, you're going to have to earn that, and you're going to have to get out there, and you're going to have to ask, and you're going to have to call, and you're going to have to allow yourself to be rejected, and you're going to have to make yourself vulnerable. But, you know, it's either do that or never make a movie.
Right. It's the heavy lifting, I guess. So let's talk a little bit further about how the script, the rights, how does that then get to production? You know, what happens next?
What I did is, so I got the rights finally, and you know, I think at this point, I like to say often now that I think the three most important things for a filmmaker at my stage are a good attorney, a good accountant, and I have those first two. The third one I'm still working on. I haven't quite gotten there, but the third one is a good graphic designer, just because there's so many things that I need, you know, whether it's just keeping my website up to date or all the posters and postcards I have to make for promotional materials. It's just having someone in-house, and I can't do that kind of stuff. So having someone in-house who has your vision, has your sensibility, and can crank that stuff out for you. But anyway, so I took I had an attorney make a watertight contract between Max and me, and I took that back to Louisiana. I decided to put a business plan around it. So it took me about 6 months to put the verbiage together and have an attorney inject the proper legalese on top of that and put a solid business plan together and subscription documents and what do you call them, operating agreements for the LLC and all of that. And then I was trying to raise $2 million in $50,000 chunks, so I was trying to find 40 investors at $50,000 each. And so the first thing I did was make a list of people in the area that I was targeting, which was Shreveport, who in this area could possibly afford a $50,000 investment. And I had kind of, because I had done sales, I had sold furniture for 4 years, and I had sold home security systems for Brinks. So I kind of felt just in my sales efforts that it takes about, for every sale, it takes about, you know, it's like a 10 to 1. It's like a 10 to 1. Yeah, it's like a 10 to 1 ratio. So I was like, if I'm trying to find 40 investors, I'm probably have to talk to 400 people. So I wouldn't stop building my list until I had at least reached 400 people, because I knew, you know, I wasn't, without a list of that size, I had no shot. And so I put that list together, and then I just started calling people. And it took me about, you know, when I started, I thought, you know, I might not even raise a penny, but, you know, I was able to get some important people on board early on. And, you know, some things that were really important to me in doing it was that every time I raised the money, you know, and I knew I had someone with a lot of stature and a lot of business respect in the community, I would say, is it all right if I use your name as I...
Reference selling, almost in effect.
Exactly, yeah. And so, you know, that was really useful to me, because I'd go to meetings, you know, after I had the first $100,000 or the first $200,000, and I would say, you know, I'm just letting you know, so-and-so and so-and-so are on board. And, you know, for certain people, they're thinking in their head on a subconscious level, well, that guy has a lot more money than I do, so they must have a lot more business sense. So if they think it's a good thing, then it must be a good thing. I had, like, good business advisors. These were just people that raised money, you know, for different ventures. And this one guy told me, you know, always say, you know, I'm trying to think how he put it, but always say, you know, I think I've got about $300,000 raised, or you know, I feel like I've got about 300,000. So you're not lying. Like, it doesn't mean you actually have $300,000.
You think you have?
Yeah, like, I mean, you know, I feel like in verbal commitments in some form or fashion, I'm close. Like, you know, and that was like. And I mean, from day one, I mean, you never, like, even the very first meeting when it wasn't completely true, I guess, but you don't want someone to think they're the very first person. So,
Right.
you know, when someone would say, well, how much money have you raised? Well, you know, I think I've got about
Well, you're a
100,000.
sales guy. I mean, that's really comes
But, you
through,
know,
yeah.
but, you know, sales, I never, you know, salesmen have a bad reputation. Like, I don't think I ever lied.
No,
Like, and I
right.
don't think I ever will lie. But I mean, it's the spin, right? It's the way that you articulate the
Right.
situation. I have 49 investors, and what I
49
tell
investors.
people is because of my sales experience, I had had so many experiences in sales where there's such a chasm between that moment when someone says yes, and that moment and the moment when someone actually hands you the money.
So true.
And so in film, in film especially, like in fact, the people that kind of gave me a copy of their business plan and were real helpful, they had that happen. They had thought they had all their money in place. They hired everyone. About a week before they started filming, they were relying on one big investor. That investor withdrew the money.
Yeah.
And so I said, between that story and all my sales experience, I said, you know, I'm not gonna put myself in that situation. If people want to invest and they don't want to get shut out of this before it's too late, I'm going to set up an escrow account, and if people want to invest, they're going to have to give me their money, and I'm going to have that money, and they can't have it back, you know, per the agreement. And so I knew at any point, once I started raising money, that I knew for a fact, I mean, I had that money in hand, and, you know, that wasn't going to happen to me. I mean, my agreement with my investors was that if I didn't succeed in raising at least $1 million by a certain date, they got all their money back, plus the interest that it accrued in escrow. So that made them comfortable that,
fair
you know,
deal,
I wasn't just going to go blow their money while I was raising the rest of the money. I mean, because the first $1 million I couldn't even touch until I hit that marker.
Right.
But then I also said, because I was trying to raise $2 million, I said, if I succeed in raising at least $1 million and 1 cent, but less than $2 million, I reserve the right to go ahead and make the movie at that lower level if I so desire. So if I raise $1 million and a penny, but I'm not able to raise all the way up to $2 million, I could still make the movie at a discounted rate.
Right. Okay, so you know, you've talked about the funding, we've talked about the business plan and so forth. Now, at some point, you actually begin production and shooting this thing. Of course, you have to cast it as well. So I want to talk about that a little bit, casting the movie and then getting into production.
I closed out investment on February 14th of 2006. We started filming late January of 2007. So it took me almost a year to go from having the money in place to getting into production. The first big decision was I felt like, even though at the point that I had all the money, it had just been Max Allan Collins and I. That was the team. And really, it was, I mean, he gave me the script. We worked on the script together. But from that point on, it was really just me, you know, as far as The Last Lullaby goes up to that point. And the next thing I felt like I needed was a producer, because this was my first feature. And even though a lot of that, securing the rights to the project, raising the money, a lot of that oftentimes falls into a producer's duties. But, you know, I was comfortable doing those two things, but I felt like in terms of assembling a strong team, I was going to need someone who had stronger contacts than I did. So the first person I called was this guy, Dave Copeland, who's a friend of mine out in Los Angeles, and he had produced 4 features already, and he was the guy that I would go to periodically and say, hey, you know, I'm doing this, you know, what do you think? And he would advise me, because he was always like 3, 4, 5 years ahead of where I hoped to be in my own career.
Mentor in a way,
Yeah, totally.
Right,
yeah, absolutely. And so when I raised the money, I called him and I said, Dave, you know, I've got the money, but I really want a producer now, and do you know any young, hungry producers that might be a good fit for this? And he said, let me think about it, let me ask around, call me in like a week. So I said, sure thing. So I called him about a week later, and he said, you know, I've been thinking, and I think I might be interested in being a part of this. But one of the stipulations is he wanted to make some changes to the script, and he made a real strong case for some of the changes he wanted to make, and we ended up bringing on a second writer. And so me, him, and Peter Began, the second writer, did some work for about 3 months on the script. You know, the script is everything in terms of getting people on board, particularly at this budget level where you can't buy people. And so, you know, the only thing you're using to kind of seduce them is the script. Once that was done, the next step was bringing on a casting director, and then a cameraman. And so kind of assembling the team and everything took another, you know, about 4 to 6 months in casting and crewing up. And then we were ready to film by early January.